I'm really glad that we have tonight with us Theo Witsell. As many of you know, Theo has spent a lot of time in Arkansas and has been extremely helpful for those of us who want to explore the natural world here in Arkansas. Just the other day, I saw this vine with berries on it, and I wanted to know what it was. So I went to my trees, shrubs, and woody vines of Arkansas that Theo helped to co-author and found my answer. It was a raccoon grape. But I'm Theo is now turning his attention to work with the Southern Grasslands Institute and has helped found that organization, if I'm correct, and is its chief conservation officer. And so Theo's going to talk to us a little bit about that and his current work with grasslands. So glad to have you with us this evening, Theo.
My pleasure. Thanks very much. Okay, well, hopefully I'll show a lot of great pictures and this will be a visually interesting presentation and captivate everybody's attention for the next hour. I'm going to turn my video off just because I want you to focus on the presentation and also the bandwidth I want to direct towards the audio for this Wi-Fi. So I will go do this. First off, thanks again. I appreciate it. I'm going to talk to you about the work of the Southeastern Grasslands Institute, which, as was mentioned, I co-founded with my friend Dwayne Estes back in 2017. And a lot of you know me from my work with the Arkansas Natural Heritage Commission, where I worked for almost 25 years. But I left that organization in January to go full-time with SGI. And so I'm going to talk about SGI today. If there is time and I get through that part of the presentation, I do have at the end a Grasslands of Arkansas presentation that we can just go into and look at those pictures. But I think I might need all the time for this. Anyway, thanks again. The photograph in the title slide here, just so you know, is in part of Alabama that it's called the Black Belt ecoregion, which is a area of high pH calcareous prairies, very, very similar ecologically to our Blackland prairies in southwestern Arkansas, and but quite a bit distinctly different as well, just because of its geography, where it is in the world. And this is a project, it's probably our largest single piece of property that we're working on that's not like a federal national forest or something or national park. This is a privately owned farm, about 11,000 acres down there, that has about 6 to 7,000 acres of ancient remnant grasslands, savannas, blackland prairies. It's an absolutely incredible property where SGI is doing some on the ground work there with the landowners. And private lands are a big component of what we're working on. And I'll talk more about that as we go. If I can figure out how to advance the slides. Okay. We like to talk about our organization being born out of the myth of the squirrel, which is something that that Dwayne and I both learned growing up. We heard the same story in elementary school that the southeastern part of the United States was so densely forested that a squirrel could travel from the Atlantic coast to the Mississippi River without touching the ground. And some of you have heard that, I bet. Of course, it's patently false. And in fact, the Southeast was a very diverse mosaic of different kinds of habitats. Dense forests, like we learned about, also open woodlands, savannas, and many, many types of grasslands. In fact, the grasslands of the Southeast are the most biodiverse, uh, are among the most biodiverse in all of North America, and certainly much more biodiverse than those of the Great Plains or the Upper Midwest. And I'll talk a little about why that is as we go through this. We like to sum up our mission as saying we are saving the forgotten grasslands of the South, and that phrase comes from a book that inspired us very much by Dr. Reed Noss called Forgotten Grasslands of the South. And I would really encourage everyone to read this book. It's a wonderful read, and it's not overly technical. It's kind of written for a popular audience, and it has it's this great synthesis of all these lines of evidence about why southeastern grasslands are so important and how extensive they once were. Uh, these areas are home to over half of the biodiversity in the Southeast, and the vast majority of the biodiversity that's of conservation concern, the things that are vulnerable, rare, declining, etc. So they're a great priority for conservation action. And we take kind of a big tent definition of grassland. We of course include the prairies and the open glades and balds and things that are treeless, but we also include what we call sort of the wooded grasslands, savannas, where open woodlands, ecosystems where there are trees as part of the landscape, but they're generally far apart from each other or far enough apart from each other to support a sun-loving flora on the ground, more of a grassland flora. And all of those are in great decline, those habitats. But these are sort of 9 major grassland types that we recognize across the Southeast. And all of these have many, many subtypes, of course, but prairies, savannas, balds, which are high elevation grasslands in the Appalachian Mountains, glades, which are thin-soiled rock outcrop grasslands. We have many types, 9 different types, in fact, in Arkansas of glades, and barrens being sort of the slightly deeper soiled prairie-like grasslands, but over rock or some other type of substrate that makes trees unhappy over time. Fens, which are groundwater-fed seepage wetlands with a high pH, that are open, meadows and bogs, marshes, and river scour grasslands, which are these streamside grasslands and high energy river systems. We have them in Arkansas on the Cossatot River and the forks of the Upper Saline and Washita, the South Schlafave River, places like that, where there's extremely violent flooding. Rarely, but it's so extreme when it happens that it really scours off woody vegetation off of these high sort of boulder bars and bedrock scour areas. And we have a very fascinating grasslands there with some extremely rare species, including new species to science, regularly still being discovered and studied and described out of all these grassland types, actually. But yeah, so check that out, that book, Forgotten Grasslands of the South. And together, all of these ecosystems in our region of the Southeast are what we refer to as the Southern Grassland Biome. And that is a term coined by the late Theo Witsell, great ecologist from Alabama. Everyone knows him from Harvard University and his global work that he's did later in his career. But he's from Alabama, and he loved the longleaf pine savannas down there. And he wrote the foreword to the book, and we were inspired by him as well. And Dr. Reed Noss, I should say, was instrumental not just in inspiring us, but in founding our organization and serving as an advisor for us. So that's cool. We would define grasslands along with these definitions that he has in his book. A grassland is any community in which the grass layer with its associated forbs, which are broadleaf wildflowers, is the dominant layer in terms of either total cover or biomass or both. And in some instances, shrubs or trees can emerge above the canopy as scattered individuals to form savannas. An ecosystem may be designated a grassland when the canopy of grasses is continuous or nearly so. And this is the area in which we work. It's the SGI focal region, and it's what we refer to as the biogeographic Southeast. And that's kind of a fancy sounding term. That just means the area where the southeastern flora and fauna and ecology is sort of the dominant. And so even though this is a little different than the cultural Southeast, like you wouldn't maybe think parts of Pennsylvania or Long Island, New York would be in the cultural Southeast, it's in this biogeographic Southeast. And really the northern limit of this region is defined by the maximum extent of the Pleistocene glaciation. So everything north of that northern line, at least from about central Missouri on up to New York, everything north of that was covered by huge sheets of ice relatively recently, ecologically and geologically speaking. So All of that within the last 100,000 years, and a lot of it within the last 20,000 or 100,000 years ago to 20,000 years ago, under ice up there. So all of the flora and fauna that's, up there now, or at least all the flora, was down here because that was all under ice. And because the Southeast was never glaciated, it has much higher biodiversity in many groups, especially plants, but also animal groups as well, because it was never covered by that ice sheet. And then our western boundary follows some ecological regions or ecoregions, but it approaches sort of what we call the dry line, and the edge of the Great Plains as you go out that way. And then, of course, the coasts. A little history on the organization. Dwayne Estes and I co-founded it in 2017. We had backing from a philanthropic foundation called the Band Foundation. They're out of New York and Northern Virginia, and they specialize in sort of high risk conservation initiatives, I guess is the best way to sort of summarize what they do. And they're looking for bold solutions to really extreme problems in conservation, ecology, biodiversity in particular. And that's what we pitched to them, that we thought the grasslands were. And they agreed with us enough to start us off small and gave us a planning grant that allowed us to sort of write an outline of what we might do for an organization that would address specifically grassland loss, and specifically within this hotspot of biodiversity, the biogeographic Southeast. We focus on building strategic partnerships. We can't do this alone. It's a huge problem, and we're working with all sorts of different groups, nonprofits, federal agencies, private individuals, anybody, a lot of foundations, philanthropic foundations across that geography, and outside if they want to fund work in this or partner on us with work in this geography. And I mentioned our geography already. We have a focus on both science and history because a lot of the grasslands were lost a long time ago, basically following the advent of European settlement, which began, of course, 400 plus years ago in the East, on the East Coast, and moved its way west. We have to look to history. I mean, a lot of these ecosystems were profoundly changed and in some cases lost before they could be studied or very well described, or before the camera was invented, before they could be painted and talked about. So it's in some cases almost a forensic exercise as you go east in some of these areas, especially the northeastern part of our region, places like Delaware and New Jersey and Northern Virginia, where there's been such a long history of intensive land use up there. And then we focus especially on the ground conservation. That's been our big drive, especially the last 3 or 4 years, to do not just the science into things, but also getting out and restoring degraded examples of grasslands, protecting high quality examples, and being stewards and helping other people learn how to be stewards of these grasslands. And then we focus on what we call our complement, not compete philosophy, where we don't want to move into all these different geographies and sort of we're the new thing. What can we do here? We're trying to see what's being done there already, work with groups that are already working there. That's really our philosophy, and it's been instrumental in our success, I think. The early days of SGI, Dwayne and I were working on that, and we sought advice from a couple of our really mentors, and I won't say idols, but just about, folks that we really looked up to, and Dr. Reed Niles and Dr. Alan Weekly, who've been major players in Southeastern conservation long before we were on the scene, and they've been great to work with and advise us along the way. So where do we work? Well, we work across this geography, but of course we can't be everywhere at once, and we're starting small and we're building our organization. We are headquartered in Tennessee. I live in Little Rock still, by the way. Some people have seen me around and asked me if I was visiting or whatever. No, I've not left. I'm staying here. Because we're across this broad geography, not everyone can be centrally located, which makes it kind of flexible and nice. But we're headquartered within a university, Austin Peay State University, which is in Clarksville, Tennessee, up near the Kentucky border. It's about an hour or so northwest of Nashville. And that's where we are set up. They have a department there called the Center of Excellence for Field Biology. And we started out, we were under that, and we are now our own, what they call a center of the university, which is going to co-equal with the Center of Excellence for Field Biology now. And we're kind of an oddball in that university setting because we work across this huge geography and have different satellite offices. And those are right now three sort of official satellite offices with multiple employees. We have one in Little Rock, which we opened in May, and we have 4 people here in that office. We have one in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we have one in Roanoke, Virginia. We also have a tribal program that we started, and we have 3 tribal liaisons, and they are based, one is in Hot Springs, Arkansas, one is in Tahlequah, Oklahoma on the Cherokee Nation, and one in Cherokee, North Carolina on the east with the Eastern Band of Cherokee over there. Then we have a number of other satellite staff who are working, from home, but in other parts of the geography. So that's where everybody's sort of scattered right now. Atlanta, Athens, Georgia, Nashville, Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and we're about to have somebody in Northern Virginia. Oh, in Florida. The way we set up the organization, we have sort of a central leadership team and a couple of science advisors. That's Alan and Reed Noss. And then we have sort of our senior leadership team. Then we have the geographic coordinators. So they're based in the satellite offices, and they run the regional programs for the organization. We also have youth outreach coordinator, a volunteer coordinator, an administrative assistant, or 2 administrative assistants, all working with us in our central office. But these folks across the top here work in Chattanooga, Roanoke, Athens, Georgia, and in Clarksville as our central coordinator there. We also have several programs that are sort of separate from those regional offices. We have the SGI Native Seed Program, which houses the Bureau of Land Management's Seeds of Success. I can never say that. It's a real tongue twister. Seeds of Success Southeast, which is the Seeds of Success program is a federal initiative. It's very strong out west, which is where it started. This map shows where the different seed collections for the program have gone on. So these are seeds that are collected from the wild of, species native plant species that are important for ecological restoration of different ecosystems, a lot of them grasslands. And these are locations of the seed collections that it's probably a couple years old, but it shows what is still the case is there's this giant hole in the southeastern US where the program has historically not worked and is wanting to branch. And we are the coordinators of that program for the Bureau of Land Management and all the federal partners. And in fact, we do a lot of that with our own staff, but we also, to be more efficient, contract out to regional partners. And one of the regional partners, the one over in Arkansas and now Louisiana, Mississippi, is Audubon Delta. So Audubon Delta, Jonathan Young is our coordinator there, and they're on contract with us to do some collections in Arkansas. So that's been great. We have the tribal program, and all the tribal liaisons are members of tribes in the Southeast, and their job is to coordinate with the tribes to make sure that we're incorporating indigenous knowledge, conservation knowledge into what we do, and that also we are keeping the tribe's priorities in consideration and focus in all the work that we do. So this is a new program. Corley is our first one. She's been with us for a couple of years, started last year. And then Katie and Gabrielle have just started this year. So that's an active program. They've just been at the Native Fish and Wildlife Conference this week, presenting and networking up there. We also have two science teams, two field science-based science teams. And so we got a, a bunch of funding from the Natural Resources Conservation Service and the Farm Service Agency to help us classify and map different types of grasslands all across our southeastern region. And so to do that, we have two 3-person teams. One is based out of Clarksville. We call them the Eastern Field Science Team. Each team consists of a full-time biologist and an ecologist and a seasonal technician position every year, and that's funded for the next 3 years. So the Eastern team's working over there out of Clarksville, and they're covering a big geography from sort of Western Tennessee and Mississippi over to the east. And then we have another team based here in Little Rock, the Western Field Science team. If you haven't met them yet, you might. Allison Wilson is our biologist. Gabby Lefevre is our ecologist, and Samantha Heller's this year's technician. And they've been doing a lot of field work around the state in grasslands. And they're gathering data in plots on the ground, vegetation data quantitatively to understand all the different types of grasslands we have, what are the species that are playing the major roles. That's used for restoration, but also just basic classification. These grasslands are so poorly known in some cases that we really don't even have them described. Like you would describe a species with a name and things. It's the same thing for these ecological communities. But without the basic field work to do that, it hasn't been done. You can't even protect something if you don't understand it or you don't have a name for it. So we're working to fill that basic data gap with these two teams. And then we have our restoration crews, and this is just we have actually doubled the size of these teams in the last 2 weeks. So we just hired a bunch of folks to work out of Roanoke, Virginia, and we're getting some more people to work out of Chattanooga. But these folks go out and they do every kind of land management and restoration for grasslands that you can think of. So they do things like invasive species control. They open up savannas that are too dense with trees. They'll do prescribed fire. They'll do seed collecting. They grow plugs up into, or grow seeds up into plugs for restoration, plant them back out. That's what they're doing in this picture here on the left. They've got a big auger and a tray of seedlings, and they're out there in a degraded prairie, putting species back that are missing in action because of past grazing in this case. And then, they have all sorts of equipment and doing the prescribed fire. The Megan on the right there has a giant bag of a native seed mix that we custom designed and purchased from Roundstone Native Seed. They had local or eco-regionally sourced seed for these grasslands that we're restoring in former agricultural fields around northern Tennessee in this case. And that's a seed drill behind a tractor there on next to her. And you can see the folks doing chainsaw maintenance and a prescribed burn. And the burn crew that's the big thing right now. We're really training up a whole bunch of people in how to do prescribed fire safely. And we're burning, I think we did 30 burns this last season, and we've just started to do our first burns of the season this year. So we're out there with our crews doing this where it's needed. And where are we located? Well, we got our headquarters is the basement of a former Honda dealership in Clarksville, Tennessee. And it's a kind of a rustic facility, but it's perfect for us. It's a giant garage bay in one end, and then it has some rooms that are back in the back and are split into offices, and we have cubicles and storage and everything. And we can store all our tractors and four-wheelers and trucks and all the gear that we have here. And we can clean seeds and make a mess and all that sort of thing. And it's just perfect. So this is early on. We were first moving in, and some of our staff puzzling about how we're gonna make this our home here. And we met with the university's architects and come up with a plan. We don't have the funding yet to do the improvements, but we're gonna essentially do this at some point. And the upper floor of this Honda dealership has now been renovated right now to be the university's new welcome center. So it puts us in a nice place where we're sort of at the center of activity, but we're sort of down on our own, but people can see us and know what we're about. So that's been nice. And it's also great being at the university because it allows us to engage in
working with students and conducting research with, pretty high level academics. So that's been a great resource. We have a great partnership with some of the professors there, and they conduct research on some of the properties we're working on. We help advise their graduate students, and Dr. Dwayne Estes is the co-founder, is a professor at Austin Peay as well. So that's how we ended up there. But it's been great working with all those folks. And it also is great for us because these students we advise in, I don't know how many cases, but a bunch, have ended up working for us, starting maybe as seasonal technicians while they're in school. And we've hired a few of them on full time. So that's been great. It's a good connection. We're also engaging in a lot of conservation planning activities at the eco-regional level. We got a nice grant from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation 2 years ago, and the project's still ongoing. We're going to wrap it up next spring to do a grasslands status assessment and conservation plan for the Cumberland Plateau ecoregion. That's a big area in parts of 4 states: Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And it's interesting for me personally to work in this ecoregion because it is the most similar ecoregion to the Boston Mountains in northern Arkansas, I guess, on the planet. I mean, it's essentially the eastern cousin of the Boston Mountains plateaus in the Southern Ozarks, and a lot of really similar things, a lot of things that are not found over here, but it's ecologically makes a lot of sense to me, just having worked for 25 years in the Boston. So I just thought that was really neat. It's kind of an Arkansas connection there, and that's neat. We also are really have a focus on publications, and we're trying to advance science about grasslands in particular. And we're doing a mix of sort of popular technical type publications, almost like this is essentially a field guide to grasslands of the Mid-South that actually came out right as we were starting SGI. So it's not branded as SGI, but it is an SGI initiative essentially. And we'll be doing a series of these. It's like you can think of it almost as a field guide to these ecosystems across the regions. And then we're doing we got a lot of funding from, well, I won't say a lot. We got funding from the U.S. Geological Survey to do some work a couple years ago, and came out in some technical reports that were, peer-reviewed, published reports on specifically conservation needs of grassland species across the region, the rarest of the rare, assembling just sort of the most current information on their status and getting those out to the professionals. And then we're publishing in as many journals as we can. This was a big paper that we had in conservation biology, working with some of the same things. It was about rare species status assessments under the Fish and Wildlife Services Endangered Species Act, but specifically on grassland stuff, there, grassland species. And we're just continuing to work. We encourage our staff to publish their research and so on. New species descriptions out of grasslands, we're trying to be heavily involved in that. We and our collaborators right now, just for plants, know of 99 species new to science that are undescribed from southeastern grasslands. So there's this huge backlog of basic need to describe these species, to get them named, published, and so we're trying to channel money from philanthropic sources or government grants into that sort of work, which has historically not been funded, and that's why there's a backlog in part. But we're also losing the expertise needed to do this because academic institutions are not training people to do this sort of classical taxonomy anymore. Emphasis is on experimental ecology or molecular genetics and DNA work, and which can be part of this process, but it needs sort of that classical taxonomic work as well. And then we had a pretty important paper come out last fall, or maybe it was this spring, in the Natural Areas Journal about river scour grasslands in particular. And the cover photo is one of these southeastern river scour grasslands. You can see some rare Baptisia aberrans there in the foreground, which is a species of concern that occurs in those river scour communities. That was a neat one. And then next year, we're going to be featured in National Geographic, which is kind of not a scientific journal, but that'll be neat to be featured there. Rumor has it there might be a 3-page fold-out map, so we're working on that now. And we are sort of champions of the classical sort of field science, collect specimens of describe these new species, document things with herbarium specimens, and that's a big part of what we do. This is John Michael Kelly. He's a sometime contractor with us ecologist out of Louisiana, and he's documenting the flora of an undescribed grassland type that's only known anymore from some roadside scraps. And he just published a really great flora of these roadside prairies. That's all. It's historically was common in northwestern Louisiana, probably, but today it's almost completely gone. But he's doing some great work there. And that second photo is 6 gigantic plant presses, 8 feet tall, and that was one collecting trip that just Dwayne and I did for 3 days in Virginia, and we collected 320 something plant specimens. So that was a lot of fun. And then there's some specimens there on the right. And then we have those in our herbarium, which is there at Austin Peay University. It's a joint SGI Austin Peay herbarium there, and it's an important resource. So these are pressed, dried plant specimens with data on the labels that we are digitizing and making all of this available on the internet. So anybody can go on the internet and see all the specimens in the collection and read the labels and get the information off the labels. And it's not just Austin Peay doing this, it's all the herbaria now in the whole region. So there's essentially this giant virtual herbarium that's coming online where you can see millions of plant specimens, and you can say, show me all the specimens ever collected in Pulaski County, Arkansas, and you'll get 10,000 specimens from 150 different herbaria around the country where they ended up being sent, but they're all from Pulaski County. It's just an incredible resource. This is the herbarium there at Austin Peay. And then, of course, I mentioned the on-the-ground restoration. We've got the burn teams. We've got the ecological restoration crews. We're out there partnering with others. We're doing a lot of work. We work on Tennessee state parks. We're working on private land. We're about to start the restoration work on our largest ever project. We got a project in 3 of the national park regional, 3 regions of the National Park Service. We're going to be working in 38 national parks, identifying and restoring grassland remnants and doing some reconstructions, which is where a site has been completely destroyed. Maybe it's been a farm field for 100 years, where we're going in and planting back kind of a facsimile grassland based on research of the nearest known sites to try to get as close as we can to species that are present and so on. But we're going to be doing probably in the neighborhood of 4,000 acres across 38 national parks from Mississippi all the way to Vermont. And Vermont is out of our region, but this is like a little bonus. We got 1 park up there. So it came with the other 37. So we're happy to do it. And but yeah, most of it's all in our region there. The seed program is a big initiative. We are currently, actually, our director, Marcello Davidis, just left for a job. He's from Italy, and he moved back to Italy after starting our program from nothing and really building it up. But he went back to Italy, and he's working for the Society of Ecological Restoration. But so we're interviewing for that this week. We're hoping to fill that position soon so I can stop trying to do that job too. This is some of the seed team and volunteers and some of our other staff doing a seed cleaning. So they're out collecting. They do 2 sorts of work. They'll collect, like I think some of the folks from Audubon you all have probably done this here for Audubon, but we go out and collect single species. So you might have 30 volunteers, you split up in teams of 2, and each team might work on 1 species, and they'll collect a whole bunch of seed from that species by hand. And then those get cleaned 1 by 1, which is what these folks are doing here. Sometimes we'll harvest with machinery, a combine or a flail vacuum or something, and I'll attach to a tractor. and do bulk seed collecting of many species at once, and that'll go usually right back to restoration, in our case anyway. And but these other ones get seed banked. We have a dry room, which has a very low humidity and cool temperature, where we can store seeds for the short term. And then we have deep storage, and like where you freeze it and you reduce the humidity down, vacuum seal the seeds, and put them in these freezers. And then we also have a big refrigerated room that we just got with a big grant. It's not, you can't see it in this picture, but it's just like a room size refrigerator basically, and that's stored for short-term storage. Those seed then get put into seed mixes, and again, there's a seed drill there. There's different kinds of ways we do this, but we prepare a site that's typically been in agriculture for a long time, or we spray it with herbicide and get rid of all the weeds for the planting, burn it off, we clean it off, and then seed it right into the ground, and then mow it regularly for the first year or 2 years, and then start burning it after that. And it takes 3 years before it starts to look like much, but you can restore some facsimile. You never put an ancient prairie back, but you can make really good habitat if you do it right. And we have a focus on rare plants. Dwayne and I are both botanists by training and love, and we have so many exceedingly rare species of plants that are found only in these rare grasslands. That is just a program in and of itself, really. And we actually don't have dedicated funding right now. We did for 2 years, but that has dried up. So now we had an actual program, but now we're sort of absorbing the work of that program into our other programs that do have funding. So everybody at SGI becomes a botanist, and everyone learns the rare plants and the sites where they work, and works on it. And then that beautiful orchid in the foreground on the left there is the federally endangered white fringeless orchid, Platanthera integralabia, which occurs in some really neat grasslands that we're working in Tennessee and Kentucky. So that's neat. I mentioned the property that was shown in the title slide was this one at the Sumter Farm and Stock Company in Alabama. That's one of many private lands that had remnant grasslands that we have brought funding to for ecological restoration. So the Fish and Wildlife Service and other federal agencies like the Natural Resource Conservation Service have cost share programs to protect and enhance and restore wildlife habitat. And we are now finally getting to the point where the agencies are sort of focusing on or allowing the money to sort of be preferentially given to sites with really high conservation value, where, I mean, they'll still fund all sorts of projects, but we can, when we can, shuttle that money towards these ancient remnant grasslands that are degraded, that need help, these savannas that need to be thinned and burned. We're doing that, and these are just a few examples of that. We have this volunteer program. It's hard to have a volunteer program for a small organization like ours with the geography the size we have. So we can only really have the volunteer program in certain, well, we can only have on the ground go out and help us restore, collect seed in sort of specialized spots where we have people to sort of manage that. We do have a robust volunteer program in Tennessee where we're based, and we're building those in the other areas as we can. But we are launching some programs this winter where folks can virtually participate in huge research projects that we're working on, digitizing specimens of grassland plants from herbaria, gathering and compiling data from online databases for big projects that we're working on. So there's a lot of different things that'll be coming that anyone can participate in across the region. We just have to have staff to actually engage with those volunteers so that, they're not left on a board and neglected, so. But we do really love to engage the volunteers in the actual restoration work. That's a major, people love this work. They get out and there's folks there pulling privet and overseeding, which is a neat thing where we can take an ongoing restoration we have, especially after a burn, which the photo is not showing that, but after a burn, we can go in and seed in the fall or the winter. And it's great to have kids do that work. They can go out and kind of walk on the seeds and push them into the soil a little bit and help scatter them out. It's been great. More volunteer events, and we try to build in like a field trip, just an educational field trip, have a good time, fellowship as we do the work. This is a prairie reconstruction in a city park in Chattanooga. We have a bunch of these that we've done over that way. And this is a whole bunch of volunteers out after the site's been herbicided and prepared, and they are seeding it in the fall. And then it'll, yeah, I wish I had a shot of that now. I think that was 3 years ago, and now it's starting to really look like a prairie. And again, we do a lot of outreach and education. Not all of the staff, but many of the staff, especially the coordinators, are expected to do some of this, have a certain number of field trips or events in their geography every year. And then this is this sort of online project that we're going to be launching. This is what we're calling Grasslandia. And Grasslandia is an online portal that we're designing right now. We've got some really great advisors on this that know an incredible amount about computers and programming and how to make these things engaging to the public. But we're going to basically have this one-stop clearinghouse for information and inspiration on grasslands for the Southeast. And you can come in here and say you're interested in history. There'll be a history thread as you enter this, and you can click on the history path basically through this experience on the web and zoom into a map of the Southeast, and little icons will start appearing all over the place. And you can click on one, and there's historical quotes from 1750 describing these grasslands that used to be in Montgomery, Alabama is now, or where Chapel Hill, North Carolina is now, and all these things, and photographs and paintings. And we're working with iNaturalists. If you don't use iNaturalists, you can go on their website and their app and see all the photographs of species that have been taken, millions now, hundreds of millions. But we're bringing in the grassland species from the Southeast into Grasslandia, and you'll be able to zoom in and click and look at photos of plants that people have found in different grassland regions and so on. And there'll be a scientific literature thread through there where you can zoom into the map and little icons will appear. You can click and get a scientific paper and download it right from the website. Maybe it's a flora or maybe it's a list of birds from Grandview Prairie Wildlife Management Area that was published. You'll be able to just download that. All of these experiences will be part of this Grasslandia. It'll also be a decision support tool where it'll give you seed mixes, lists of seeds that or plants that would be appropriate if you wanted to restore a grassland like that would have been present historically at Conway in the Arkansas Valley. You'll be able to zoom in and click a species list and get a list of appropriate species for different kinds of soil or different types of savannas or grasslands in that region. So all of the data is being compiled and the infrastructure is being built right now. We got some funding for this from the Natural Resource Conservation Service and the National Park Service. So, wow. Together. And my most exciting thing for me is we have started to acquire these ancient prairie remnants that are around. So we've gotten some dedicated philanthropic funding that sort of serves as an emergency fund to buy little scraps. Well, not necessarily little. I mean, the ones we've done so far have been relatively small. This is about a 6-acre site. It is the last remnant of the ancient seasonally wet prairies around the Tennessee-Kentucky border region, around Clarksville. It's called the Guthrie Prairie. It's at Guthrie, Kentucky, around the border. And it's got a gigantic population. There's thousands of these tall green milkweeds in there, which is a species of state concern in Tennessee, very rare there. And lots of other great species there. But this was going to be destroyed, developed. And we were able to get in there and buy that site, and we're now managing it. And we're looking at several other tracts right now as well. So we're hoping to continue to raise money from people that are interested in having their donations go directly to buying land and preserving it forever. So that's the dedicated source of that particular fund. That was where I got. We got 15 minutes left. That was my 45-minute exactly sort of introduction to what we're doing at Southeastern Grasslands Institute. And I can fill the next 15 minutes with a photo tour of our wonderful, probably won't even get through just the prairies. I have it divided into prairies and glades and barrens and savannas and different things, but this would be perfect for folks in Arkansas, I think. So this photo is from Flanagan Prairie Natural Area, which is absolutely incredible. It's a Natural Heritage Commission and Nature Conservancy joint project site out in the Arkansas Valley near Charleston. It is among the highest quality and largest remnants of these ancient grasslands. People are familiar with the concept of an old growth forest, and there's a general sort of understanding that those are special places. These are old growth grasslands. They're thousands of years old. We have many different types of open grasslands in Arkansas, divide them into sort of 8 major categories: tallgrass prairies, blackland prairies, similar to tallgrass prairies, rock glades and barrens of 9 different types, saline barrens, natural high salt content soils, sand barrens on deep sand, those river scour prairies or barrens, sandbar grasslands on larger rivers, marshes. Just a few examples. This is another ancient prairie remnant. This is again Flanagan Prairie. This is taken the 27th of May, and you can see the incredible biodiversity out there, the wonderful stands of Echinacea pallida, the pale purple coneflower. Incredible breeding area, of course, incredible for butterflies and other insects. Awesome. This map shows where the large grasslands were at the time of the original land survey of the Louisiana Purchase in the early 1800s. It was digitized from the land survey plat maps from about 1815, 1830s in that time period. And these are where the surveyors who were traveling a mile by a mile grid mapped the big prairies. Of course, the biggest one was the Grand Prairie in East Arkansas. There was all the prairies in the western part of the Arkansas Valley extending all the way to Conway. Conway was built in about a 3,000-acre prairie and savanna complex, by the way, if you didn't know that. Northwestern Arkansas on the Springfield Plateau of the Ozarks, the Blackland prairies of southwestern Arkansas. There's some other prairies in the southeast part of the coastal plain in Drew and Ashley County. But one thing to know is this is a low ball estimate. We know that not all the surveyors did the mapping of the prairies. We have a lot of prairies that are in one township where one surveyor did it, and they go to the border and a big prairie shown on the map, and then they stop, and the person in the next township didn't map any prairies. So there's situations like that. Also, they were only accurate at points where they were on the section line, the mile by mile grid, and any boundaries they drew in between were just random guesswork later as the maps were made after the survey. We also know that the Blackland prairies, for whatever reason, were largely missed. They just didn't map very many of them. There was a lot more prairie than that in southwestern Arkansas. And then, of course, they missed entirely a lot of small prairies that were entirely within one of those mile by mile sections where there were no lines that crossed it. We also know that in between all those prairies, where there's clusters of them, was largely open savanna, which was not mapped as prairie. For example, we just did an analysis of the General Land Survey or Land Office Survey notes. They're not just the maps that were produced, but the actual field notes for Benton and Washington County. And we found that 48% of Benton County and 35% or something of Washington County were mapped or described as oak barrens, which is oak savanna. around those prairies. So huge parts of like those two counties were either open prairie grassland or these massive, extensive oak savannas with very scattered trees, essentially prairies with trees in them. They call them tall grass prairies because of these 4 species of tall grasses, but these are just a very minor component or a very small part of the number of species. Actually, a major component. These are sort of the keystone species of a lot of these prairies, but they are just a few grasses out of over 100 that would be present potentially in these grasslands. But the grasses are really famous and loved for their rich diversity of wildflowers, many of which are found only in the prairies. Some of which, once the prairie's been disturbed by heavy grazing or even light plowing or lack of fire for a long time, just disappear. They're completely gone from these landscapes and they won't return without restoration. I won't have time to get into all of them, but just to say there's a very rich diversity of flora in these grasslands. And they're beautiful. This is the last high quality remnant chert prairie left in Arkansas. So the prairies are classified based on the type of soil or rock they're on. These Ozark chert prairies were once extensive. This is Baker Prairie Natural Area. Just phenomenal. Another Nature Conservancy and Natural Heritage Commission joint project there. Amazing. And the neat thing about these prairies is throughout the year, they're all adapted to this like extensive fire tendency, this tendency to burn in the late fall or even in the late summer when lightning would start to increase in the landscape and these dry conditions, these little pop-up storms. Before people were fragmenting the landscape and putting the fires out, you could have a lightning strike fire in September or even late August that might start a fire that would burn for weeks or even a month or more, just some fits and starts as the wind and the humidity changed and picked up. It would burn massive areas. And then the Native Americans primarily burned from the late fall into the early winter. That's definitely the fire season that they burned in regularly and maintained these ecosystems in a healthy state. But after these fires, the next spring, every group of species that as you go through the year that flower are higher than the last. They're taller than the last. So you start the year out, walk into a burned prairie in March, you'll find little violets and spring beauties and bluets and these wood sorrels and these tiny plants a few inches tall. And you come back in sort of the early part of April and everything's getting up knee high. And by early June, it's waist high. And then as you get into the late summer and into the fall, the big blue stem grass and the compass plant might be 6, 8 feet tall, something like that out there. So it's neat. Each group is getting their flowers up higher and making themselves available for pollinators. Their leaves are getting above the competition to get more light and so on. It's very well adapted to that. And the prairies, again, are also classified by moisture. So we have like a mesic prairie, which means moderately moist, not too dry. You'll have dry prairies. You'll have a different type of dry limestone prairie, mesic sandstone prairie. All these are different with different variations. Some of them have the same grasses maybe in all of them, but or most of them, but they'll have all different other species, that are only found in the one type, or a dolomite prairie or something like that. And some of them are very rare, like this little pink orchid in the lower left is the Oklahoma grass pink. Only in the highest quality unplowed ancient prairie, never any disturbance to that original vegetation soil structure, and it's gone. Exceedingly rare species. This is Cherokee Prairie Natural Area out in the River Valley. This will be taken in early July, and you can see the incredible stands of prairie gayfeather and large coneflower and rattlesnake master and devil's shoelaces out there. Wonderful prairie plants that aren't found in just anywhere, only in these grassland ecosystems. And then there's that wonderful picture again of Flanagan that I love so much. The Railroad Prairie Natural Area in East Arkansas is another one of my favorite places in the whole world. It's a sad little, it's kind of a sad little place. It's about 100 feet wide at its widest point. And it's an old abandoned railroad right of way that runs between Carlisle and DeVal's Bluff on the north side of Highway 70, but it was never plowed. And it has over 400 native plant species on it, including about 25 that are species of state conservation concern on the rare plant list, and many species that are very much rare, and some rare animals too. I found a rare bumblebee out there earlier this year when it's just amazing that these things can persist on these sites where they get herbicides and pesticides sprayed on them from these fields next door, and all the pollution from the cars and the people turning their tractors around in them and everything else. But these prairies have hung on in these little places. And this is protected, of course, by the Natural Heritage Commission. Great place. And they're always different. Yeah, I go to these same prairies when I'm traveling to go. I go to Tennessee all the time, and when I go to Tennessee, I'll drive by. I'll take a couple different routes to the Grand Prairie, so I can always hit a prairie, and they just change every year. I mean, same site and different plants will be there, and after a burn, it's really lush and tons of things flowering, and then another year there's more grasses, and it's always a different thing and a wonderful thing. This is another one of my favorite sites. This is a tract that we bought while I was at Heritage, that is a rare type of hill prairie. So the topography of the prairie can influence dramatically what's there, and they're all different from one another. And most of the hill prairies, for whatever reason, because they're not wet very long in the spring. Because they're on a hill, and so they got plowed up or converted over to pasture grasses and things and destroyed. Whereas some of the wettest prairie, we have more of the wetter types in the valley bottoms left in that region. And this type is exceedingly rare, but beautiful, full of Indian paintbrush and bird's foot violet in this picture. And if you spend any time in these prairies, I got just a couple minutes here. One of the things we have in a lot of our prairies that are in these plains are these mounds. And you see these mounds out through the prairies, and you see them even in the formerly open savannas that are now forests around in these flat plains. And these are ancient wind-blown dunes. They're they call them pimple mounds or prairie pimples. Nebkas is the technical term for them, or coppice dunes. And these are ancient wind-blown dunes. And so this picture on top shows kind of an area where they're still forming in the desert. And you can see there's these arid plains that are sparsely vegetated. And then there's these mounds that have more vegetation, grasses or shrubs on them. And in really dry periods, the wind will blow the soil out of those flats and will accumulate around vegetation and form these mounds. And that's how they were formed. I learned that these were all like 5,000 to 9,000 years old, that they formed during this dry, hot climatic period during that time. But there's actually a technology now where they can age how old these are. And they found that the ones in Arkansas, there are some that are thousands of years old, but some of them are much younger. And for example, the ones at Warren Prairie Natural Area down in Druin and Bradley County are 600 to 700 years old. So there were areas that were that arid. And if you've been to Warren Prairie, it makes sense because there's these really short grass, barreny places in these flats. And those mounds there are really big, and they formed very recently. So that's kind of a neat thing. And this is what they look like from aerial photograph. When you have a prairie that has these, you have really diverse growing conditions for plants. You have these mounds that are elevated and well drained, and you have these seasonally wet sort of flats between them and little depressions and ponds almost between them that are seasonal. And you get species richness, number of species very high of plants, especially, but even animals. If you need soil to burrow into, I've seen, a coyote even, for example, or all these little voles and mice and things that burrow. They like those mounds because the soil is much deeper than the surrounding. And now we have this incredible LiDAR imagery where they can see through the trees and give you a very detailed laser scan of the ground surface. And that's what that looks like. So these are pimple mounds from a LiDAR scan of Warren Prairie. And the flat areas there are those areas where the soil came from long ago, and the mounds are where it ended up. and you get that area. And there's some plants that are found only on the mounds. This is a neat little uncommon wildflower called the mealy-fume wort, that its specialized place is the mounds in these prairies. And you'll see, if you want a picture of the mounds, this is the time to get it, when you can really see them. Anyway, that's another shot of what used to be a massive prairie down south of Fayetteville in 1995. And that's the same shot in 2014. So we're losing these out of the landscape. Unfortunately, I'll end on this point, even though it's a sad one. The prairies, part of the reason that they're so far gone, so the loss has been so great, is they were the first places that people settled. They came right to them. They settled on the edge of them, usually in the savanna or woodland, at the edge of the prairie. They had wood in the woodland and savanna to have, lumber. They had and shade, and then they had rangeland, or if it was a deeper sold prairie, they could plow for agriculture without clearing the forest. And so those are the first places that communities started over many places in Arkansas, or the whole Southeast. And then as the little communities turned into towns and the towns turned into cities, they just used it all up. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. Thanks, I appreciate it. That's time, I think, for me. I'd be happy to stick around as long as y'all want and answer questions.
Yeah, thank you, Theo. Really appreciate your presentation and the work you're doing.
I do need to figure out how to get the video back. I somehow turned off all the view. I can't see anybody. That doesn't matter, I guess.
Yeah, maybe Uta, if you can.
There, that works. Yeah, great.
Any questions?
That was incredible.
Thank you. It is. They are incredible.
So, where can we find some of the publications that you mentioned? Do we go to the Southeastern Grasslands Institute?
The website. We have a website. Let me. I'll just say it. I had a slide, but I didn't get quite to it. It's SE for Southeast, just SE Grasslands with an S.org. And there's Facebook and all that stuff too. That I don't remember the specifics, but I think you can find it pretty easy. But segrasslands.org. And hopefully by next year, mid-year, certainly by this time next year, you'll be able to check out Grasslandia portal.
Grasslandia.
All that stuff on there, yeah. But we're ways out on that, but we have it developed behind the scenes, and it's got lots of bugs, but we're fixing them and building content. Content will be added all the time. It'll be better all the time. Yeah.
That's going to be incredible.
Thank you. Hope so.
Theo, this is Karen Holiday. And when you're clearing a new area to plant, there's an extensive root system of all the invasives and stuff. Is the spraying sufficient to kill that root system? How do you deal with getting them completely killed out before you start planting the native plants?
We have our standard practice now is an entire year of treatments. We'll do 5 herbicide treatments over the course of one growing season. And we'll plant in the fall. And even with that, it does do most of it. Johnson grass is this non-native invasive grass with a big creeping underground stem about as big around as your pinky that will sometimes make it through all of that, and we'll have to spot spray it even after the planting in the future. We did our biggest prairie reconstruction we've done is for Google, or the web company Google. They have these data centers where they have these massive facilities that have all the servers and stuff for the internet. And one of those, actually quite a few of those, were in areas that were grasslands historically, but They funded us to do 110 acre prairie restoration or reconstruction, we call it, on former ag land at that one up in northern Tennessee. And that one we planted, and even after 3 years, we had to go in and basically take all the grass out of a couple spots. So herbicides have gotten to, herbicides are a mixed bag. I'm not like super into herbicides, but they're a very good tool for certain things if you use them right and use the right one. But there's herbicides will only kill grass. They won't hurt any wildflowers, broadleaf plants at all. And we had to go in. The Johnson grass was so bad in a few spots, we had to spray, and we lost all the native grasses we planted. But they're pretty cheap to put back, so we were able to come back a year later and regrass that area. But it didn't hurt the wildflowers. But there weren't a lot of wildflowers where the Johnson grass was anyway, actually. So that Johnson grass is one. There are a few other things, but 5 herbicide treatments will get most of them.
And another question is, how do you do outreach to look for new funding sources? And are you, broadening your outreach?
Yeah, so I could not begin to tell you how many grant proposals I've written over the last 8 years, 7 years, but it was a lot of them, a lot of nights with me and Dwayne, the early years, just staying up, hammering through these grant proposals. And we got so many you get rejected. We would write them to everywhere we could get funding, that we didn't think was, that we thought was a sincere, institution. And we still all the time. And we have the problem with the grant funding, the challenge, I should say, is a lot of times it will only it'll fund work on the ground, but it won't fund the infrastructure or the capacity you need to do the work. It won't let you buy a truck, or it won't let you buy a computer, or it won't let you pay your staff benefits, or whatever it is. The things are very difficult sometimes, and that's why we really like this diverse. We have a diverse strategy. It's like diversifying your portfolio, I guess. You want to have some philanthropic funding where somebody just, what do you need? I want to support you. Well, we need $100,000 to buy a tractor and 2 trucks for this field crew. And, you can maybe get, that'd be $150,000. But, it's just getting it where there's no strings or like limitations on the funding is the tough part. So you got to have that diverse funding stream. We apply for grants from agencies and government agencies, foundations, anybody we can talk to. Just people that want to support us can donate. So we are not a 501c3 at this time, but we operate under the Austin Peay University Foundation, which is a 501c3. We have a great arrangement with them where people can donate tax deductible to them, and we get all of it from donors like that. So that's been helpful. But those are the ways. And on our website, there's a donation button and that sort of thing. But all of the above is the answer, I guess, to your question. We've made some videos. Dwayne is a very charismatic guy. They call him the Prairie Preacher. And he was just featured. PBS did a half-hour documentary on him that just came out. PBS Appalachia out of Virginia. It hit last week. You can go, if you Google for the Prairie Preacher PBS, I think I'm sure it'll be the first thing. But it's quite a good documentary. And that within a week of that hitting, we were seeing people reach out to us. So that's been good.
Oh, great.
Right. I'd love to coordinate with you and do a field trip sometime to one of the prairies for birds and plants.
That'd be great. I love it. Love doing that.
Okay. It's
All
a
right.
deal.
Yep. Anybody else?
Thanks again, Theo, and really appreciate your time here with us. And
My pleasure.
we'll look forward to. I like that idea, Karen. We'll look forward to going out and seeing some of these great Southeastern grasslands together.
Let's do it. All right. Count me in. Bye,
Me
everyone.
too.
right.
Thank you. Thank you.